victories for Trump-approved candidates this month. His slate of MAGA challengers unseated 6 Republican Indiana state senators who had the temerity to oppose Trump on gerrymandering. Remember that? That was a few weeks ago. Then next in his crosshairs, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, who voted for Trump's conviction after his impeachment on January 6th. He lost his primary, too. Then it was Thomas Massie, one of the most conservative members of the House, who angered Trump by helping to force the release of the Epstein files and oppose the war in Iran. He lost to a Trump-endorsed challenger last week, and now Trump has unhorsed one of his party's most senior senators, John Cornyn, a man who tried so hard, so hard to stay in the president's good graces, from eating at a Trump burger joint to posting a photo of himself reading Art of the Deal. Shame that didn't work, right? Wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because the president told Republicans to vote for Paxton, one of the most notoriously unethical public figures in all of American policy today. I mean, I can't even use the words that Republicans in Texas used to describe Ken Paxton here on this family program. The first thing the Republican Party's Senate elections arm had to do after Ken Paxton won that race was to immediately attempt to delete months of press releases blasting Paxton is corrupt. Again, this is the Senate Republican committee, right? But Paxton has never crossed Trump, and more than ever, Donald Trump is the Republican Party.
Last night was incredible. Not only Texas, but so many other places, and the numbers were fantastic. And they've really been that way for a year. If you look, they thought they were going to outweight me. You know, we'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms.
I think the best way to understand all of this, the way Trump's relationship to the Republican Party and even his relationship to the media in some cases and the entire political institutions of the country, is just like a toxic relationship, sometimes an abusive relationship. And as with any like deeply dysfunctional toxic relationship, one of the weird things about that is the closer you are to it, the harder it is to see the reality clearly, right? Like the people in it don't quite see what's going on as well as the people who are outside of it. The reality is that while Trump can dictate terms in Republican primaries, he's pulling the party farther and farther away from what the vast majority of Americans want. Here's an example of this dynamic, and I want you to look at this because I think it's one of the most revealing bits of data to come out of last night. So look at Starr County, Texas. It's right there. It sits on the border with Mexico. It's actually the county in the U.S. with the highest proportion of Hispanic residents in the entire country, according to the 2020 census. Now, Starr County famously flipped to Donald Trump in the last election after more than a century of voting Democratic. It was a huge deal. Donald Trump won Starr County by 15 points. And it was widely, and I think correctly seen, as evidence of Trump's strength with Hispanic voters in that 2024 election. So if you look just at the percentages of last night's Senate runoff in Starr County for the Republican nomination, you'd say Donald Trump is still dominating, right? This is Starr County. His candidate beat Cornyn there by nearly 50 percentage points. But what's that percentage based on? How many Republicans actually turned out to vote in this runoff? Well, virtually none. 90 votes in all. That's not a typo. That's not a mistake. 90 out of 36,000 registered voters in Starr County. In a county where Donald Trump won 9,500 votes just 2 years ago. In fact, in that same county, Starr County, in a single Democratic primary for a local judge back in March, more than 13,000 Democrats turned out to vote. If you're doing the math in your head, that's a lot more than 90. Those numbers are why Democrats are feeling, well, let's say relatively optimistic about this being a real race, about the possibility of flipping that Texas Senate seat, possibly the Senate itself. Here's the map of Senate races this November. Democrats need to hold all their seats and flip 4 red seats to take the chamber. And honestly, that looked nearly impossible 6 months ago, a year ago, before Trump endorsed Paxton, the atrociously fraught candidate Democrats hoped they would get. It's just clear every day that Trump's strategy for power now is a kind of, we might call a vanguardist strategy, right? Tighter and tighter hold on fewer and fewer people, like some influential, powerful, perhaps, as we've seen with the folks in Jan 6, the folks that he may want to give public money to, like violent folks, right? But that's the strategy. right? Total control, a small group of people. You see it in the polls where Trump is plunging to new lows. Just hit a new low in the YouGov poll today, if I'm not mistaken. And you see it as Democrats widen their lead on the generic congressional ballot. You also see it in the increasing, I mean, almost impossible to watch, like physically repellent sycophancy of the Republicans that have so far survived Trump's whims, as demonstrated by the coterie of kiss-ups that dominated today's cabinet meeting.
First of all, thank you for your leadership, sir, for making it possible.
Mr. President, you have made us a nation of builders again. You're leading us to the greatest economy that the world has ever known.
Absolutely, sir. I think actually your efforts on the reflecting pool are actually a great segue.
You turned Venezuela from a sanctioned adversary into a strategic ally in 45 minutes. Never happened in history before.
The economy that you were building is not only strong, but secure and resilient.
All that flowing to our Gulf Coast refineries is also helping to keep the price of gas down at home.
I just want to note one more thing to give you a sense of how committed this president is.
I hear it everywhere I go. Please thank the president for putting us back on track. They thank you. They love you.
So, sir, just to reiterate, resilience and prosperity have been the marks of your second term.
I mean, I gotta say, I don't go in for really like old school constraining, I think sometimes awful gender conceptions. But if I did, I think about like my grandfather who's sort of, from a different time, like it's unmanly. I'm sorry. What are you doing? The level of bootlicking helps the rest of us see plain as day what's staring us in the face. People are abandoning MAGA and the Republican Party. They're distancing themselves from Trump as they leave and his base of support shrinks. The concentration of primary voting diehards and cabinet-level dead-enders in Trump's party only increases. This is almost like an accounting identity, right? You've got a group of people, and the people were like, I'm not so into this, leave. Who's left? Who's left? They're the people showing up to vote in Starr County, all 90 of them. They're the people sitting at the cabinet meetings. That's who's running things right now. This dwindling, smaller, concentrated group of people. It's the defining political dynamic right now in the country. One that can really only be broken through mass mobilization and democratic elections, which is why threats to upend democracy will only grow more intense as Trump's faction of MAGA diehards keep shrinking. Adam Sturwood is a staff writer for The Atlantic, author of the 2021 The Cruelty is the Point, The Past, Present, and the Future of Trump's America. McKay Coppins is also a staff writer for The Atlantic, author of 2015's The Wilderness, a book about the battle over the future of the Republican Party. They both joined me. Now, McKay, let me start with you because here's my first question to you. As someone who wrote a book about Mitt Romney, I think is sort of really done great reporting on a kind of group of Republicans that are basically no longer exist. Your Bob's Corkers, your Jeff's Flake, your Mitt Romney, Cornyn. I mean, Cornyn, I think, was to the right of all those. The Republican folks around Cornyn, I don't think they thought he was going to lose by 30 points. And I just wonder, everyone just seems so surprised. They're running around being like, have you seen this guy's rap sheet? He's cheating on his wife. And I'm just like, do they not see this? Is it like a toxic relationship where they can't see what's going on, or are they pretending to be this dumb?
I actually think there's something interesting going on the right that you might, if you don't kind of live inside or at least aren't tuned into the conservative media ecosystem, you might not have been following this conversation. But for the past several months, there's been this debate in the Republican Party about whether Donald Trump is losing his grip on the party. This is like a big point of discussion. And on one side, there are the MAGA bitter enders who are, arguing that, no, he's as strong as ever. Look at how strong he is in all these primaries. Look at how well his preferred candidates are doing. They cast him as kind of like almost a hitman who's like moving through the party, taking out every Republican who has been insufficiently supportive of him, right? On the other side of that debate have been Republicans who are desperate to move on from the Trump era, who see Trump as kind of a past his prime rock star who's like on an endless farewell tour, trashing every hotel room that he stays in, and the Republican Party is the hotel room, right? And like I think that the Cornynites, like the Romneyites, the Republicans who have never been fully on board with this, who have always wanted to move on, who are desperate to move on now, just like they hoped that the party that there was some large enough contingent of primary voters who were with them, and unfortunately they were just wrong. Like Trump really has, as you pointed out at the top here, he has tightened his grip on the party even as it shrinks, and the Cornynites are just a rarer and rarer breed in the party.
Yeah, Adam, there's their famous book by the acclaimed sociologist Albert Hirschman called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. And it's about how people deal with institutions they have relationships to. And, you can leave it, you can be loyal, or you can raise your voice to try to change it. Exit, voice, and loyalty. The Republican Party, there's no voice anymore, right? Like, that's the one thing that's clearer and clearer to me is it's exit or loyalty. That is what is on the table. And that, to me, was what was represented in that vote last night.
Yeah, look, in states like Texas that are pretty conservative, that are red states, the fact is that most people, most of the time, vote Republican. And so if you have a grip on those highly motivated Republican voters who show up in primaries, the kind who really obsessively consume conservative media, you can shape those contests. And, come general election time, people who tend to just kind of vote for the candidate with an R next to their name are going to vote for that candidate, and you're going to win anyway, despite the fact that you've picked someone, who has faced allegations of corruption for years and who's been, in the news for his frequent infidelity.
Let me ask you this, Adam. I want to stay with you as a Texas resident and voter. It's going to get, this was already extremely expensive. It's going to be very expensive and incredibly nasty. Basically, out of the gate, the Republican line on James Tallarico is basically calling him like everything but a slur. This was today. Stephen Miller, the Democrats made history in Texas by nominating their first transgender Senate candidate. The Democratic Party's official Twitter response was, "Shut up, you ugly F word." This is like day one, and I got to imagine that like new depths are going to be plumbed here. Is that your anticipation of what this campaign is going to look like?
Yeah, look, nobody should be taking lessons on manhood from Stephen Miller, but my answer is yes. When they're doing this stuff about how he's a vegan when he ordered a potato, egg, and cheese taco, which is obviously not vegan, it's all sort of gay baiting. To describe it frankly, and the purpose of this is to get liberals to howl and say, oh, they're gay baiting, and then have the whole election be about this sort of dumb culture war stuff, because it certainly can't be about the economy improving or prices getting lower or inflation going down, because those things are only happening in Donald Trump's group therapy meetings with his cabinet. So, it's going to be nothing but this sort of ugly culture war stuff that's intended to attack Tallarico, where I think progressives thought he was strongest, which is his, being sort of an authentically Texan person, who's from here, who is culturally Texan, and not, some sort of like East Coast carpetbagger who moved here to run for office.
McKay, I saw this piece. There's an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that made something click in my head, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Which is Donald Trump, I think, anticipates that if the Democrats win the House, which I think he anticipates they will, he will be impeached. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think he's said this quite publicly. And of course, if he's impeached, then that would go to the Senate for conviction. Now, the second impeachment of Donald Trump set a record for the most cross-party votes from senators to convict in the 4 impeachments we had in the history of this country. This was the Wall Street Journal thing. Mr. Trump was going to be impeached next year anyway. Witness his primary interventions against GOP Senate incumbents. This is his real war now. He thinks, perhaps rightly, installing 1 or 2 toadies might be the difference between conviction and acquittal in next year's Senate when more independent-minded GOP members start eyeing the post-Trump vista. I thought to myself, that's actually pretty astute, and I think there's probably something to that. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's actually really hard to overstate the degree to which impeachment was the defining experience of Trump's first term for Trump, right? For the rest of the country, impeachment was one of many, many dramas that we underwent as a country. But for Trump, like the psychological toll that it took on him was enormous. Like he was obsessed with the fact that he was being impeached. He was obsessed after the fact when he was out of power, when he was impeached for the second time, which is why, like I said, he and his most loyal supporters have been obsessed for years since in punishing the Republicans who crossed him and voted for impeachment. And they have very effectively purged them all from the party. And so I think he has a real fear of having to go through that again. And it's why, I mean, it's not even I'm not speculating here. He's talked about it publicly. Like the way that he frames these midterms is as don't let the Democrats take control because of what they'll do to me. They'll impeach me again.
Yes.
That like as if that's the most persuasive argument you could make to your party.
Yes, in fact, at the Republican retreat, that is what he said. Basically, you got to win the midterms so I don't get impeaching. And it was very clearly what he said. I'm Sir War and McKay Coppins. Gentlemen, thank you both. Appreciate it. Ahead, the new report that Trump's Department of Justice is now, get this, ready for this, criminally investigating the woman who accused him of sexual assault and had that accusation held up by a civil jury. Coming up, Congressman James Clyburn on the surprise vote that just saved his seat. That's next. Jim Clyburn is the only Democratic congressman representing the state of South Carolina. He's also the first black person to represent the state in Congress since the end of Reconstruction. He has held his seat in majority black district for 33 years, many of which he spent in positions of party leadership. This year, though, as we all know, Donald Trump, with an assist from the conservative majority of the Supreme Court, demanded Republicans nationwide, in an unprecedented move that has never really happened at this scale, suddenly, in the middle of the decade, redraw their congressional maps explicitly to get rid of Democrats and to remove majority black districts, one and the same in states like South Carolina. That was the plan, to essentially eliminate black representation to the South because those districts tend to elect Democrats. And it seemed all but certain that Clyburn's seat would be essentially redrawn and Clyburn's position eliminated. And then something pretty rare happened. State Republicans found some kind of backbone. Yesterday, the state legislators in South Carolina just refused. They voted against it. They voted down an effort to redraw their maps before the deadline expired. Now, the state might still try again before 2028, but for now, Congressman Clyburn will almost certainly be returning to Congress for his 18th term. And Congressman Jim Clyburn, joins me now. Congressman, it's wonderful to have you here. I was thinking about you, obviously, as we all followed these developments. I mean, first of all, just your reaction to it. Were you surprised? Did you have advanced notice? Did you have conversations that led you to believe the outcome yesterday was what was going to happen?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Chris. No, I was not surprised at all. I was a little bit disappointed at some of the processes that took place, but the result I expected. And the reason I expected that is because there are two things about South Carolinians that those of us who live among them understand. There's a pretty broad independent streak that runs through South Carolinians, and they don't like people telling them what they must do. But secondly, they have some real principles, South Carolinians do, about the Constitution, about our democracy. They may not interpret it the same way that I will, but they do believe in fundamental fairness. And if you listen to the speeches that the Republicans made on this subject, they kept talking about people have already started voting. 2 weeks ago, people from overseas were casting their votes. And then on yesterday, before they ever convened, over 20,000 people voted on yesterday morning, ended the evening with 56,000 people having voted. And on today, another 30,000 voted by 4 o'clock this afternoon. So people are engaged in this process. They don't want to have their votes thrown out. And these senators did not want to be put in that kind of a situation.
I think it's fair to say that you are, sir, an institution in South Carolina politics, and not just, I would add, in Democratic politics, but in the politics of the state across both parties. Were you involved in conversations? Were you having phone calls face to face? Were you talking to members of the state legislature, talking to the governor, talking to other members of the congressional delegation about this attempt and making your case for why it would be a mistake?
I never spoke to the governor on the subject at all. I did speak with several of the legislators a week or so ago when they were debating the issue in the House. And of course, the House passed it as we expected that they would. And I did talk with some African-American senators and some Democrats a couple of days before they started voting. And on today, I've spoken with several senators afterwards, including several of the Republicans. So I understand exactly what the machinations were, and I expected the result to be what it has been. And I do expect that we'll be revisiting this after the primary election on June 9th.
There are other states that have made noises about doing something similar. Alabama has moved forward and were just blocked by a federal appeals court. Louisiana is moving forward with a new map. There's talk in Mississippi. Mississippi is somewhat similar state to South Carolina. Both those states have some of the highest African-American populations in the entire country. Both of them only have a single district represented by a Democrat, and that district is majority minority. Do you think that what happened in South Carolina will have carryover effects to some of those other states?
I think so. I think that those fundamental principles that ought to be considered when you're doing redistricting were just violated by this map. Whoever drew this map up in Washington and sent it down here violated the basic principle, number one of which is maintaining communities of interest in contact with each other. They just threw that out of the window. The whole notion of not or minimizing the splitting of counties. One county split 4 different ways in order, as they did down in Tennessee with Memphis. This is tortious behavior that should not take place. If you want to draw districts along partisan political lines, that's one thing. But if you are fishing around to lump all of the black voters in one place, split them up. And you don't have a problem with a congressional district that's 75% white. That's an overrepresentation of white people in South Carolina. And so you've got these 75% white districts, and that's okay. And you draw a 45% African-American district, and that's not okay. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. And I spoke with some Democrats and Republicans who just feel that what they did up in Washington when they sent that map down here was just disrespectful. I think they only spoke 7 minutes and told them that they would not answer any questions. You got state legislators here trying to maintain representation for their constituents, and you're going to just give them a map and not explain to them what the map is all about and refuse to answer their questions. What kind of respect is that? This, to me, was an attempt to make a foil out of the state Senate here in South Carolina, and they were not having any of it, irrespective of their political persuasions.
Quickly and finally here, just when you said that map from Washington, is your contention or your belief that this was essentially dictated from the Trump operation from the president to the politicians of South Carolina?
Absolutely. We heard about this map a week or so ago. Some members from South Carolina, from the legislature, went up to Washington and sat down with them, and they had a virtual discussion of the map that I understand from one state senator lasted for 7 minutes and 30 seconds. And then it was announced to them that they would not be answering any questions about it. Well, how disrespectful can you be? No, I don't quite understand why they would think any person would take that, at least more independent-minded South Carolinians. And that's, I think, is why those senators did what they did. Had nothing to do with anybody here. It was a disrespect that was visited upon them by those operatives in the White House.
That is a really fascinating, illuminating context, Congressman James Clyburn. Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Still to come, new reporting that Donald Trump's DOJ is now criminally investigating E. Jean Carroll, the woman who accused him of sexual abuse, who he sued and who successfully defended that suit from defamation. Lisa Rubin, who's been reporting on that case for years now, has the details. That's next.
शाही लिखावट के हर पन्ने में तकदीर है सहमा सा हूँ तुझ में मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या वजह तू दिल की है पुकार मेरी तेरी तारीफों से रुकता नहीं शाही लिखावट के हर पन्ने में तकदीर है सहमा सा हूँ तुझ में मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या मुझे सामने पाँव में हम खड़े हैं देखा के राहों में दिल को आके फिर से तू भी थाम ले हम यहाँ तो मैं तेरे ही नामों के अभी जाम ले